What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my top 5 meta decks for the November 2020 format. Phantom Rage is right around the corner, and it brings with it a slew of new powerful cards that are going to upgrade some old strategies. And so this episode's dedicated to those strategies, as well as some of the former decks that have just been absolutely devastating the prior format. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So kicking things off with number 5, this is really a slot that I wanted to dedicate to all of these new Phantom Rage strategies, because there's a lot of decks that even just receive a single card of support that helps bring them into competitive meta contention. Let's start with a deck like Prank Kids. Prank Kids gets access to the brand new Meow Meow Link monster, and this card is absurd. It turns every Prank Kids monster into a one-card starter, and every single time you hear one-card starter, that deck should immediately demand some of your attention, because not many decks have access to that and can do some of the powerful plays that Prank Kids is capable of offering. You also have the fact that Meow Meow not only enables those Link 1 capabilities, but also has that secondary effect that it can banish itself in place of a Prank Kids monster tributing itself for an effect, which means when you have something like Battle Butler on the field, you can Regeki your opponent's board at quick effect speed, not once, but twice. That is just insane, and that's all the things that Meow Meow essentially enables a deck like Prank Kids to be able to do. Another deck is PK Fire. The set is named Phantom Rage, so it's literally named after the Phantom Knight cards themselves, and if there's one thing for certain, it's that people love Phantom Knights, and they love PK Fire and Burning Abyss decks. I mean, Phantom Knight cards are just so versatile, right? You play them in Orcus, you play them in Burning Abyss, you play them in like Warrior decks because they have synergy there. They just offer so much and can do so many things. They act as extenders, they act as defensive options when you convert them into like Fog Blades and different things. There's so many cool and interesting things the Phantom Knights offer, and so it's no surprise that people are excited to see that archetype receive more support, and it's really good on top of it. You also have a deck like Zodiac, and what's crazy to me about Zodiac is that I've been talking about Zodiac as a nice budget option for several months leading up to this, but so many people have high hopes for Zodiac that some of the cards like Thoroughblade and Chakanine are getting bought out now and are making it less and less more desirable for the budget players, just because they keep bolstering the prices of those cards and making it that much harder to obtain from a budget level. Now, obviously the tier 1 contenders aren't going to care about that too much, but the thing is, Divine Arsenal Zeus is an absurdly broken Yu-Gi-Oh card. You have a card that at quick effect speed can send all cards on the field to the graveyard, and you can use this multiple times. Like, this is insane. Zodiac is such a great enabler for this because, again, one card starter. If you have any Zodiac monster, you effectively have a way to get into Divine Arsenal Zeus, and then all you have to do is just stack a Borbo, attack your opponent directly, and then Zeus comes down and you pretty much have full control over the game. Zeus is just a format warping card. It took Zodiac up to tier 1 potential in the OCG for quite some time until the meta started to readjust and kind of bring it back down a peg, but there's so much potential when you blend it with archetypes like Tri-Brigade, like Dogmatica. There's a lot of different Zodiac hybrid variants that do exist. I think Zodiac has a lot of potential, and people are definitely looking to this to be one of the strongest decks of the format. And then the last deck I want to discuss is Virtual World. Phantom Rage is the first debut set for the Virtual World cards, and I think people are heavily sleeping on this strategy, but people need to wake up when they start realizing what this deck has been doing both in the OCG as well as some preliminary tournaments here in the TCG. In the OCG, they had one of the largest tournaments of 2020 in Taiwan, and this deck took first place. It was a 3v3 event, to be fair, but the thing is, they still took it all the way when there was over 1,000 people in contention, so that's pretty remarkable nonetheless. You also have in the TCG, they were having some preliminary tournaments, and this deck, I don't believe took first place, but I believe it got either top 4 or top 8, and there were multiple of them that did, and so that's pretty good considering the fact that this deck hasn't even officially been released. Now, for people who might be unaware, Virtual World is a combo deck that can easily facilitate level and rank 3, 6, and 9 plays, because that's what a majority of the monsters are, and so this deck can very easily climb into a true King of all calamities. That's already pretty good, but it can do even more than that because it has an in-archetype Synchro 9 that is a floating macrocosmos and can recur itself from the graveyard even if you get wiped. In addition to that, they have a searchable trap card within the archetype that allows you to shuffle your resources back into the deck and also pop your opponent's card. So when your end board is calamities, macrocosmos, and a card that pops your opponent's threats, That's pretty strong, and not to mention, even if the board gets broken, you can bring the level 9 back from the graveyard with its effect. The deck can toolbox almost anything in the deck because that's how the archetype functions, and then you also have the fact that you can go into stuff like Cloudy Castle and then give yourself a second true King of all calamities to kind of just seal it up and ensure that you're going to win the game. And so the deck actually has a lot going for it, and so if you're able to pick up these cards for cheap, because maybe right out of the gate the deck doesn't do a whole lot, I would recommend getting a core and just sitting on it, because who knows, if this deck starts picking up steam, those cards are going to shoot up in price really quick, and you're going to definitely be sad that you missed out if you couldn't get in on the low end. And with that said, if you guys are planning on buying any new cards from Phantom Rage, whether it's the singles or sealed product or a case or anything like that, you can use my TCG Player affiliate link down in the description. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps directly support the channel. So overall, yes, I do know that this was a very large conglomerate of decks for a number 5 slot, but really any of these decks could potentially break out and be the top tier contender for this format. We'll have to see, but I figure just highlighting all the different new strategies that Phantom Rage brings to light would be the best way to go about it, since this video is going up prior to Phantom Rage's release, and we're gonna have to take a few weeks to see how the meta develops, so be sure to check back in December for that top 5 meta decks, because I'm sure we'll have a much more solidified format once that time rolls around. But coming in at number 4, we've got the premier control deck of the format, and it is Invoked Dogmatica. This deck does a lot of things very well. This card is able to just out-tempo the opponent in terms of card advantage so well, because a lot of the cards in the Invoked Dogmatica strategy just generate +1s or effectively replace themselves. And so yes, while you're not doing a lot of the absurd crazy combo shenanigans that some of the other decks on this list might be able to do, you are trading that off for the ability to be able to play a much slower game, to be able to just play a more traditional style of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you trade your resources efficiently, you're able to control the field, and while you may not be able to OTK necessarily out of nowhere, you're going to have a very strong, very consistent strategy, and that is what's going to propel you to victory. Invoked and Dogmatica just harmonize so well together because neither archetype excludes the other archetype from being played. It's actually rather inclusive in terms of allowing you to play a much wider breadth of cards overall. You're also able to adjust the deck accordingly depending on how the meta shapes up, because you can change your extra deck toolbox for stuff like Nadir's Servant, or you can change your hand trap lineup if there's more combo decks, or depending on what the efficiency of certain hand traps may be, you can then pick the right cards accordingly depending on whatever given event you might be entering. And overall, it's a really solid deck. It's a nice control option for anyone who likes playing a slower game of Yu-Gi-Oh! You don't have to know like any ridiculous combos or anything like that, and there are people who do prefer to play control decks over combo decks, so if that's the case, this might be the deck for you, and that's why I gave it my number 4 slot. Now coming in at number 3, we've got a deck for the players who crave combo, and that deck is Infernal Knight. Infernal Knight is still a very powerful strategy. It's able to hand loop cards out of your opponent's hand. It has a lot of its plays that circulate around a 1 or 2 card combo for the most part, and by being able to end on not only boards that have multiple negations that are very difficult for your opponent to deal with, by also being able to rip cards out of your opponent's hand, you're doing something that's incredibly unfair that other decks don't have access to. This deck is very potent and very popular just for that reason, and being able to play something that gives you that knowledge of being able to look at your opponent's hand. Smoke Grenade Thief is a hell of a card, right? Being able to rip hand traps out of your opponent's hand with cards like Aqua Dolphin is great, because then you can ensure that your combos are going to go through, and some decks really just can't deal with the amount of offensive pressure that this deck can mount, and even if it's going second, this deck can play through multiple hand traps rather easily, and even multiple forms of interruption really can't hold a candle to just how robust this strategy truly is. This strategy has been one of the strongest decks for a few months now, and for good reason, because it is able to pump out so much pressure, and if you aren't able to stop it on its initial turn 1 plays, there's a very low percentage that you're going to be able to come back and actually win that game, because this deck is that devastating. So for those reasons, that's why I gave Infernal Knight my number 3 spot. But coming in at number 2, we still have one of the most devastating decks trying to fight for that number 1 dynasty, and that deck is Dinosaur. Yes, Dinosaur is still at the top of the metagame because this deck is just crazy. You are able to just OTK your opponent so easily with a deck like this because a card like Ultimate Conductor Tyranno just does not care. To help facilitate that, you also have cards like Soul Eating Oviraptor, which just searches your whole deck, in tandem with Fossil Dig, which is like not once per turn. Let's remember, reinforcement of the army is limited, but Fossil Dig is still at 3. I'm not sure when we get the December ban list if that's still going to be the case, so for any Dinosaur lovers out there, you guys better together, enjoy it while you can. You guys also have Miscellaneousaurus, which is like one of the most unfair cards imaginable. If this card resolves, your opponent just cannot interact with any of your plays, and that's what makes Dinosaur such an aggressive deck going second, is because it can just break through boards so easily, not worrying about what the opponent has, because if you have a Miscellaneousaurus, you can feel pretty good setting up behind it because all of your opponent's plays are just not going to work. Even going first, Dinosaur is still pretty powerful because you can end on boards such as Ultimate Conductor, Tyranno plus Dolka, and that's fairly difficult for a lot of decks to play through, especially if they rely on Link Summoning. Conductor Tyranno can flip everything down. Dolka is 2 effect negations in 1, so that's pretty good. Dinosaur has not had a better opportunity to show its power than now, and so again, I'm not sure if it's necessarily going to survive that December ban list because there are some arguments for why some cards should be hit. We'll talk about that in a later video, of course, but for now, Dinosaur is still dominating the top tables, and that's why I gave Dinosaur my number 2 spot. But that's going to bring us to my number 1 meta deck of the November 2020 format, and that deck is Dragon Link. This should surprise no one who's been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Recently because Dragon Link has been dominating everywhere. This deck has one of the highest win percentages online, and this deck is truly remarkable. This deck can play through so much interruption. It just has extenders after extenders. We've talked about the significance in this video of 1-card starters, and just like some of the other decks, Dragon Link is also capable of doing the exact same thing. And that's what makes the deck so frightening, is because the engine does require a lot of cards, but you can also play a lot of defensive cards in addition to that to slow your opponent down, and the boards you're able to build with a deck like Dragon Link are truly impressive. I mean, you're able to do so many unfair things, set up so many negations, and again, if you don't have that interruption for any of those starters or extenders, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble because this deck can not only play through hand traps, it can play through Nibiru and come out almost completely unscathed. Yeah, you might trade the Nibiru for like a negation, but if you're still staring down multiple negations regardless, then I don't really think it's going to matter too much. This deck is incredible because it can do so many unfair things. I mean, it can set up a Buster Lock if your deck is very extra deck reliant. It can set up a nearly unbreakable board that's very difficult for a lot of other strategies to contend with, and that's why you see the meta shifting to a very hand trap heavy lineup, because there are only certain hand traps at this point that are actually able to stop a deck like Dragon Link. Some hand traps are very low impact by comparison, and if you're not playing those hand traps, or you have to be playing a completely different anti-meta strategy, you are just going to get overrun if you sit across from a Dragon Link player and you're coming to the table unprepared. This deck has just been dominating. There is no question that this deck is the number 1 deck of the format. We'll have to see what happens though in a post Phantom Rage format, because we have a lot of new cards coming in, a lot of new strategies that are getting bolstered by Phantom Rage, and who knows, the meta may take a significant shift, but for now, all eyes are on Dragon Link, and that is going to be the deck to beat. So until the December ban list comes, we are going to need a new strategy that is truly remarkable and robust enough to outclass a deck like Dragon Link, because that is the deck to beat of the format, and that is why it is my number 1 deck of the November 2020 format. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. And if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.